stood in the observation window of Meridian Prime Station and looked at the vacuum of space. She had been a diplomat for 23 years. She had negotiated trade agreements between hostile species, solved disputes that could have started wars, and learned to speak the languages of 100 different worlds. But nothing in her training had prepared her for what she was about to do. Behind her in the containment sector of the station, 4 young waited. They were cubs, barely past their juvenile phase, and they were all that remained of their species' future. The war had ended 6 months ago. The empire that called itself the Collective had attacked thee and made it uninhabitable. They had done it on purpose, as a message to any other species that might challenge them. The young cubs had been off-world at a cultural gathering when their home burned. Now they were prisoners in a metal box on a station that did not want them. The Galactic Council had given the assignment 3 days ago. They wanted someone to assess the cubs' mental state and determine if they could ever be anything more than weapons and dangers. Suspected what the Council really wanted was someone to recommend they be destroyed. She had spent her career finding solutions that did not end with death. She was not about to stop now. Turned away from the window and walked toward the containment sector. Her boots made quiet sounds on the metal floor of the station. The corridors were empty. Most of the station's population avoided this part of Meridian Prime. Fear did that to people. The security officer at the containment entrance looked tired. His name was, and he had been guarding the cubs for 3 weeks. He looked like he wanted to sleep for a year. "They are not getting any calmer," said. He did not stand up as approached. "We had to sedate them twice yesterday. They broke one of the wall panels trying to claw their way out." Nodded. She had read the reports. The cubs were dangerous, yes, but they were also terrified. There was a difference. Most people did not bother to see the difference. "I want to go in," said. Stood up quickly. "That is not safe. They barely respond to food drops now. They just growl and attack." "Open the door," said. "Director." "Open the door, that is an order." Opened the door, walked into the containment sector. The 4 cubs were in the far corner of their living space. The largest one saw her first. His name, according to the files, he was black and silver, with sharp teeth and eyes that burned with rage and fear mixed together. He stood up and roared at. The sound was loud. It shook through the air and through his chest. It was meant to be a warning, a threat, a way of saying, "Do not come closer or I will hurt you." Had heard that sound many times in her life. She had learned not to listen to it as a command. She had learned to listen to what was underneath it. She did not move forward. She did not move back. She simply stood and let roar until his voice became hoarse and he had to stop. When the roaring ended, sat down on the floor of the containment sector. She sat slowly, making sure her movements were obvious and not threatening. She sat about 3 meters away from the cubs. "My name is," she said in a calm voice. "I am not here to hurt you. I am not here to put you in cages any than you already are. I am here because I know what it is like to lose everything." The other 3 cubs looked at her. One was smaller and had pale fur. She had the most scared eyes. Another had stripes of brown and gray. The last one was medium-sized and had a cut on his shoulder that looked infected. Took a step forward. His claws made sounds on the metal floor. He was close enough to kill now if he wanted to. Did not move. "I had a daughter," said. She was not sure why she was telling them this. Maybe because they needed to know that she understood. "She was 7 years old. She died in a station accident when I was away working. I was on a different planet negotiating a peace treaty. I was not with her. I was not there to protect her." Stopped. His ears, which were pointed and sensitive, moved toward. "So I know what it feels like to have nothing left," continued. "To have the world take something and never give it back. I think maybe you know that feeling too." The smaller cub with the pale fur made a quiet sound. Not a roar, just a small, sad sound. Stayed on the floor for an hour. She did not move forward. She did not try to touch them. She just sat there and talked. She told them about Earth. She told them about humans and how humans were weak and small compared to most species in the galaxy. She told them about how humans had survived anyway, through thinking and working together and refusing to break even when everything broke. She told them about her daughter. She told them the girl had loved music and had wanted to be a doctor. She told them that the girl would have been kind to them, even though they were. She told them that kindness was a choice, not a weakness. By the time stood up to leave, all 4 cubs were watching her. They had not attacked. They had not tried to escape. They had just listened. Was outside the door with 2 security officers. They were ready to pull out if things went wrong. Walked past them and pulled off the protection suit she was wearing. "I want access to the cubs every day," said. "No sedatives, no weapons, just time." "The council will not approve it," said. "The council gave me this assignment. This is what I am choosing to do with it," replied. "Write it down, make the reports clear, requests daily unsupervised access to the cubs for educational and psychological assessment purposes." It was not a lie, it was just not the whole truth. Did not sleep much that night. She kept thinking about the pale-furred cub and the small, sad sound she had made. She kept thinking about 4 young lives that the galaxy had decided were not worth saving. She kept thinking about her daughter, who would have been 28 years old now if she had lived. The next morning went back to the containment sector, looked surprised to see her. The security officers looked confused. Had brought fruit, real fruit from Earth, grown in the station's gardens. She sat on the floor again and ate some of it herself so the cubs would know it was safe. Then she left it near them. Ate the fruit, then the others ate it. By the end of the first week, all 4 cubs would come and sit near. By the end of the second week, let her sit closer. By the end of the third week, when brought the cubs' real names because she refused to call them by their designation numbers anymore, something had changed. The largest cub was, the pale-furred small one was Myra. The brown and gray striped one was, the one with the infected cut which had gotten medical help for was Dex. 4 weeks into her work with the cubs, brought something new to the containment sector. It was a small device that could play music from Earth. The device was old and had been in her personal quarters for years. It had belonged to her daughter. Sat on the floor and pressed play. The first song that came out was a lullaby. It was simple and slow, with a woman's voice singing about home and safety and things that were lost. Myra, the pale-furred cub, moved closer to than she had ever moved before. The small female cub listened to the entire song without moving. When it ended, she made the same quiet sound she had made on that first day. But this time, it sounded different. This time, it sounded like she was trying to sing. Taught her the words, it was slow work. The vocal cords were different from human vocal cords. They could not make all the sounds that humans could make, but Myra tried. She tried over and over, getting the melody slightly more correct each time. By the end of the day, Myra could sing the first 2 lines of the lullaby. She was not good at it. Her voice was rough and strange, but she was singing. Watched Myra sing and listened carefully. Then he tried it. His voice was deeper and harder than Myra's, but he managed the melody. And Dex joined in, and soon all 4 cubs were singing a human lullaby in their harsh, strange voices. Found herself crying. She did not try to hide it. The cubs saw her tears and seemed to understand that this was not sadness exactly. It was something more complicated than that. Over the next 2 weeks brought more things to the cubs. She brought images of Earth on a small screen. She showed them mountains and oceans and forests. She explained that Earth was a harsh world, full of danger and predators. She explained that humans were not the strongest creatures on Earth. They were not the fastest or the most powerful, but humans had survived. Hal asked. His voice was rough, his human words slow and imperfect, but he asked. He used human speech instead of roaring. Choice said, "Humans learned to work together. Humans learned to think. Humans learned that being strong was not the same as being alive." Dex, who had a quick mind and a hunger for understanding, asked many questions. He wanted to know about human history. He wanted to know about wars and how they ended. He wanted to know about mercy. Told him everything. She did not protect the cubs from the truth. She told them about human violence and human cruelty, but she also told them about human forgiveness. She told them about wars that ended and enemies that became friends. She told them about mothers who protected children that were not their own. When asked about his, did not look away. She told him the truth. She told him that the collective had destroyed it on purpose. She told him that it was an evil thing that they had done. She told him that anger about this was justified. But anger is like poison, said. It hurts the thing it is poured into. Your anger about what happened to your home is right, but if you only feed yourself with anger, you will become like the people who hurt you. You will become a weapon instead of a choice. What is the choice? Myra asked. Thought about this carefully. She had learned over many years and many hard mistakes that there was always a choice, even when the choice was terrible, even when all the options were bad. There was always a choice between becoming what hurt you and refusing to become that thing. The choice is to be more than what happened to you, said. The choice is to decide what you want to build instead of just breaking things. Then came the day when security detected the Cubs trying to access the station's restricted areas. They had found a maintenance tunnel. They had been working together to figure out how to open sealed doors. The security team moved in quickly and stopped them. They brought Myra back to the containment sector with a stun charge wound on her shoulder. Was called to the council chamber immediately. The council members looked at her with hard eyes, recognized that look. It was the look that came right before they made a decision that would end with death. The Cubs have shown that they cannot be trusted, said. He was a merchant, and he had never hidden his belief that the Cubs should never have been brought to Meridian Prime. They attempted to escape. They attempted to access restricted areas. This confirms they are a danger. They were exploring, said. Exploration is not escape. They were trying to understand their environment. That is not a danger. That is curiosity. Curiosity from a species of killers, another council member said. Director, your assignment was to assess them. What is your assessment? Stood in the center of the council chamber. She could feel waiting for her to fail. She could feel him ready to push for the Cubs to be destroyed or sold to a research facility. She thought about Myra trying to sing. She thought about asking how humans survived. She thought about Dex's quick mind working to understand things beyond his own pain. My assessment is that these 4 young are not their species' history, said. They are not weapons or dangers. They are young beings who have lost everything and are trying to understand what they are if they are not what they were taught to be. I am asking for 1 more month. If there is no progress in 1 month, I will accept your judgment. The council voted. 3 members voted to remove the Cubs. 3 members voted to give more time. The final vote came from a human named Gregory, and he voted to wait. 1 month, Gregory said, but if anything else happens, the vote will change. Understand, Director, 1 month. Understood. That night went into the containment sector and found Myra sitting alone, nursing her stun wound. The small female cub did not move away when came close. Sat beside her and did something she had been careful not to do before. She wrapped her arms around Myra and held the young close. Myra was warm and smelled like metal and something else, something wild and hurt. Myra made that quiet sound again. Then she made another sound, and another. Slowly realized the cub was crying, not tears like humans cried, did not have tears, but a deep, shaking kind of crying that came from the center of the young female's body. Held her and cried too. She cried for Myra. She cried for her daughter. She cried for all the young lives that the universe broke and then expected to just keep surviving. I am here, whispered. I am here and I am not leaving. Over the following days, worked harder than she had ever worked in her life. She intensified everything. She brought Dex to the station's library system and let him access information. She helped him learn. She brought specifications for station equipment and let him study how things worked. She brought music too and found that he had an ear for rhythm and structure. Most importantly, she taught them all about being more than your species' story. She taught them that they got to choose who they were. She taught them that choosing differently was harder than following the path that was laid before you, but it was the only choice that actually mattered. The station's alarm system woke everyone at 3 in the morning. Pressure seals were failing in the lower atmospheric processing sector. If they were not fixed within 6 hours, the entire station would lose breathable air. Over 2,000 people lived on Meridian Prime. 2,000 people would die. Was still in the containment sector when the alarm started. She had fallen asleep on the floor next to Myra, something she did more often now. The young cub woke her by putting her clawed hand on shoulder and making an urgent sound. Checked her communication device and understood immediately. The situation was critical. The only way to fix the problem was to go into the processing sector, remove the damaged seal, and install a new one. The processing sector had high radiation. Even with protection, it was dangerous work. Ran to the containment sector door and found 2 security officers standing outside. We need to get a team into the processing sector, said. I need. We are already sending people, said. He looked scared. But it is not fast enough. The calculations say we are going to lose pressure in less than 5 hours now. The team cannot move fast enough in the radiation gear. Thought quickly, she thought about what the Cubs could do. She thought about what they had been learning. Open the containment, said. Absolutely not, said. Do you understand what you are asking? Those creatures cannot be trusted near vital station systems. Those creatures have better radiation resistance than humans, said. Their physiology handles radiation different than ours. I have read the medical files. They can move faster in minimal protection. They can fix this. And they could sabotage the entire station, replied. Looked at directly. They could, but they will not, because I am asking them not to, and because they are not what you think they are. And stared at each other for a long moment. Behind them, the station continued to lose pressure. In the corridors, emergency lights blinked yellow and orange. Evacuation alarms were starting to sound. I will take full responsibility, said. If they betray us, it is on me, but if we do nothing, we all die anyway. Made a decision. He opened the containment door. Was the first one out. The large cub looked at the alarm and at the emergency lights and its face. He understood that something was wrong. The station is dying, said. She spoke simply because there was no time for anything else. I need you to help save it. There is a place called the processing sector. There are broken things there. You need to go and fix them. It will be dangerous. You might get hurt. But if you do not do this, everyone on this station dies, including me. Did not hesitate. I will do it. Dex and Myra heard words and agreed as well. There was no discussion, no fear, no question of whether this was a trick. They understood that the station had helped them. They understood that it taught them something important about choice. They chose to act. Moved with the cubs to the processing sector, where the repair team leader, a human named David, was checking radiation suits. They cannot go in there, David said immediately when he saw the cubs. Those things will just cause more problems. They are not things, said, and they can move faster and handle radiation better than we can. Give them minimal protection suits. Let them work. David wanted to argue, but he looked at the radiation meter and saw the numbers climbing. He had maybe 4 hours left. He looked at the 4 cubs standing calmly beside, and he made a choice. The cubs went into the processing sector in light protection suits, and David watched from the control room. The radiation levels were dangerous even with protective gear, but the cubs moved with purpose and speed, and worked on removing the damaged seal while Dex studied the installation specifications, and Myra assisted with getting the replacement seal into position. It took them 2 hours. 2 hours of watching radiation levels climb while 4 young worked in dangerous conditions to save a species that had feared them and wanted them dead. When they came out, all 4 cubs were tired and weak from the radiation exposure. But they had fixed the problem. The seal was new, the pressure was stable, the station was safe. The rest of the station did not immediately celebrate. When word spread about what had happened, when people understood that the cubs had saved everyone, something strange happened. Some people were grateful, some people were afraid, and some people were angry. Called an emergency meeting with the next day. You have compromised station security, he said. You have given dangerous creatures access to vital systems. What was to stop them from sabotaging everything? What was to stop them from using this opportunity to take control of the station? Nothing, said. That is the point. They had the choice to hurt us. They chose not to. Choice matters. That is what makes the difference between a weapon and a being. A weapon is predictable, replied. A choice can go either way. I am recommending that the cubs be moved to the research facility on station. They are too dangerous to keep here. But something had changed in Meridian Prime. The story of what the cubs had done spread quickly through the station population. Some people talked about it as proof that the cubs were dangerous and unpredictable. But others, especially those who had been directly saved by the cubs' actions, began to see them differently. The council was called to vote again. This time, the vote was different. The 4 members who had been afraid voted to let the cubs stay. Only and 1 other member voted to remove them. The decision was made. The cubs would stay on Meridian Prime, but they would remain under close monitoring, would be their full-time guardian and educator. She was removed from her other duties. She was essentially made their keeper. Did not see this as a punishment. She saw it as what she had been moving toward all along. That night, the 4 cubs were moved to a new sector of the station. It was larger than the containment area. It had windows that looked out at the stars. It had more space to move and breathe. Walked through the new space with, showing him around. The large cub was quiet, processing everything. They fear us still, said. Some of them do, agreed. But they fear you less than they did before. That is how change happens, not all at once, but slowly with choices and actions and time. You showed them today that you are not just your species' history. You showed them that you get to choose what you are, that matters, that will matter for a long time. Was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, will we ever be allowed to leave this station? Will we ever go somewhere else? 6 months after the life support crisis, stood in the engineering sector of Meridian Prime Station and explained to a group of human technicians how to repair a damaged stabilizer. He was not just explaining it. He was doing it. His strong hands moved with precision, something had taught him to do through weeks of patient instruction. His mind had learned to see how systems connected and worked together. The human engineers watched and learned from him. Some of them still looked uncomfortable around, but they looked at him as a fellow worker, not as a monster. Myra had created something in the station's observation gallery. She called it art. It was shapes and patterns made from materials she had collected around the station. Some pieces were designs, patterns that had meaning in her culture. Other pieces were human-inspired. The combination was beautiful in a way that made her heart hurt when she looked at it. Visitors to the station came to see Myra's art. They came because it told a story about two species trying to understand each other. They came because beauty was a language that did not need words. Dex spent his days in the station's communication center, translating not just words but meaning. When a new alien delegation arrived at the station, Dex was often the one who explained culture. He talked about history not as a story of conquest, but as a story of a young species that had been taught to believe strength meant destruction. He talked about how his people were learning that there were other ways to be strong. Had found his place in the station's medical sector. He had shown aptitude for understanding systems and helping people who were sick or hurt. His large hands, which could tear through metal, had learned to be gentle with fragile human patients. He took pride in that. He took pride in helping people live. The four cubs had created a community center in a large, empty sector of the station. They called it the Exchange. People came there to learn about culture, to see performances, to eat traditional food that had helped them recreate using station resources. But most importantly, Young taught humans and other species about their culture. Not the violent, warlike version that everyone knew, but the actual culture. The songs that were not war songs, but songs about family and loss and the desire to make something that lasted. The dances that were not meant to prepare for battle, but to celebrate harvest and birth and connection. Watched all of this with a heart that felt both full and scared. She had let herself believe in these four young lives. She had taught them that change was possible. But she knew that the galaxy was vast and cruel, and there were powers in it that would not want it to succeed. She knew that the collective was still out there. The empire that had destroyed, though, was still expanding, and knew, from classified reports she was allowed to see, that they did not forget. The message came through the military communication channel 3 weeks before the end of the year cycle. A fleet was moving toward Meridian Prime. The official notice said it was a routine patrol, but had been in politics long enough to read between words. The collective knew the Cubs were on this station. They were coming to finish what they had started. Called an emergency meeting with the station council. She told them what was coming. They will try to take the Cubs, she said. Or they will try to destroy them, or they will demand the station hand them over. We need to prepare for any possibility. Spoke up from his seat. We should give them what they want. We should hand over the Cubs. It is the only way to guarantee the safety of this station and everyone on it. No, said. You do not get to make that decision, replied. You are not in command of Meridian Prime. But I am asking you to make a choice, said. She looked at each member of the council. You have seen what the Cubs can do. You have seen what they have become. They are not weapons. They are not threats. They are four young beings who chose to be different. If we give them to the collective, we are saying that those choices do not matter. We are saying that change is not possible. The council voted. This time the vote was almost unanimous, only voted to hand over the Cubs. The council voted to protect them. Told what was coming, she did not hide it from him. She did not try to make it sound less dangerous. The collective is moving toward us, she said. They may try to destroy you. They will certainly try to make us give you up. Was quiet for a long moment, then he asked, what do we do? That is the question, said. We could try to run, we could try to fight, or we could try something that almost no one in this galaxy has the courage to attempt. We could try to talk to them. They will not listen, Dex said. The young male had been in the room while talked to. Maybe not, agreed. But if we do not try, then we are already defeated, And if we are defeated, then everyone like you, everyone who chooses to be different, has no hope. So we have to try, even if it seems impossible." The cubs discussed it among themselves in their own language, could not understand all the words, but she understood the meaning. They were scared. They were worried. But they were also willing. They were willing because they had learned that being willing to try was more important than being sure of success. Took the proposal to the military commander of Meridian Prime. His name was Captain, and he had always been fair to the cubs. "You want to let them communicate with an attacking fleet," said. "Do you understand how dangerous that is? If something goes wrong, if they turn on you or on the station." "I know," said, "but it is the only chance we have to avoid a battle that will kill thousands of people. We have to take it." The communication screen flickered to life, and General of the Collective appeared. He was a tall being with scales the color of old blood. His eyes were the yellow of predators. Had seen many military commanders in her life, but was something worse. He was a commander who did not feel anything about the death he caused. "This is General," they said. His voice was cold and flat. "I am here to collect the specimens you are harboring. You have 1 hour to prepare them for transfer. After that time, I will take them by force. Your choice." Stepped forward. His voice was still rough and imperfect when he spoke human language, but he had practiced this moment 1,000 times. "General, I am of the people," he said. "I am asking you to listen to what I have to say before you make your decision." Did not respond, but he did not cut the communication either. Continued. "My people were killers. My people came to your worlds and took what they wanted. My people destroyed things. This is true. I do not try to hide it or lie about it." Stood beside, close but not touching. She wanted him to know she was there. She wanted him to feel the choice he was making. "But I was taught by a human named that being killers is not the same as being," said. "My species is not one thing. We can choose to be more than what we were taught. This is hard. This takes courage, but it is possible." Was silent. The general watched with eyes that gave nothing away. Myra stepped forward. She was still small compared to the others. Her pale fur caught the light from the communication screen. "I was scared when I came to this station," Myra said. Her human language was better than, but her voice was still uncertain. "I was angry because my world was gone. I was angry because my parents were dead. I was angry because humans were not and they were different and everything was wrong." She looked directly at the screen, directly at. "Showed me that anger does not fix what is broken," Myra continued. "Anger only breaks more things. She taught me that I could choose to do something different. She taught me songs instead of roars. She taught me art instead of weapons. And now I make things instead of destroying things, and my life is better." Dex stepped forward. He was the most confident of the four. "General, I have studied your history. I know that the collective believes strength means power. I understand this belief because my people believed the same thing, but taught me that true strength is the choice not to use power. True strength is the ability to stop yourself from destroying something you could destroy. That is what we learned here." Was the last to speak. He was the quietest, the most reserved. But his words carried weight because everyone on the station knew what he did. Everyone knew that his hands had learned gentleness. "I wanted to die when I came here," said. "Everything I loved was destroyed. I thought there was nothing left to live for, but did not let me give up. She taught me that I could help people live instead of helping them die. Now I work in the medical sector every day and I save lives. I save human lives and other species' lives, and maybe one day I will save lives. This is better than destroying." The four cubs finished speaking. They stood together in the communication chamber. Behind them stood with her hands visible, showing that this was real and true and not a trick. General did not speak for a long moment. The silence stretched out. Could feel every second of it like a physical weight. Then spoke, but not to the cubs. He spoke to someone off-screen in the language, could not understand the words, but she heard the tone. It sounded like anger. It sounded like someone who had made a decision that was not what people expected. "The collective recognizes a change of circumstances," said finally. His cold eyes looked at the cubs with something that might have been recognition. "We came here to destroy the last. This would have been acceptable. The destruction would have been complete. The species would have ended. The message would have been clear." His heart sank. This was it. This was the moment when everything would fall apart. But continued. "However, I am not so far from my own youth that I do not remember learning to be a soldier. I am not so far from understanding that individuals can choose differently than their species chooses. He paused. The collective will not destroy this station. We will not take the specimens for our laboratories. The action would be dishonorable. The communication screen went blank. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. No one believed what had just happened. Then roared. It was not a roar of anger or threat. It was a roar of relief and joy and survival. The other three cubs roared with him, and the sound filled the communication chamber and traveled through the station. Stood in the middle of that roaring and felt tears run down her face. She had done it. They had done it. They had looked at death coming toward them and had chosen to speak instead of to fight. They had chosen to tell their story, and they had been heard. Captain's voice came through the communication system. All station announcement. The fleet is standing down. They are moving to a holding position and will maintain distance from our station. The threat has been neutralized. I repeat, the threat has been neutralized. The station erupted. Over 2,000 people understood that they were not going to die. Over 2,000 people understood that they owed their lives to 4 young and a human woman who believed in the power of change. Found herself surrounded by station personnel wanting to thank her, to thank the cubs, to understand what had happened and how it had happened. She moved through them all and ended up in the quiet observation sector where she always went when she needed to think. Found her there. The large moved quietly for his size, something had taught him. You did it, said. You all did it. You took what you were and you changed it into something the universe could listen to. We roared, said. You taught us what to roar about. Turned to look at him. I did not teach you. I showed you that you had a choice. You made the choice. Because you showed me the choice, replied. He was quiet for a moment. What happens now? Now, said slowly, we keep going. We keep building what we started here. We keep showing the galaxy that change is possible. We keep proving that a species is not defined by its past. And them, gestured at the fleet holding position near the station. They are watching, said. We showed them something they did not expect to see. Maybe it will change something in them. Maybe it will not. But we changed what was possible just by choosing to try. And stood together at the observation window. They looked out at the stars and the ships and the vast universe that was still learning what could be. In the weeks that followed, the 4 cubs became something new on Meridian Prime Station. They were not prisoners anymore. They were not experiments or weapons or things to be feared. They were teachers and workers and artists and healers. They were proof that transformation was real. Continued his work in engineering, eventually taking a formal role as a station systems advisor. His technical knowledge became essential to the station's operations. Human engineers worked alongside him, and the partnership was strong. Myra's art was displayed in galleries throughout Meridian Prime and eventually on other stations. Her work became a symbol of cross-species cooperation and transformation. She was invited to create installations on 3 different worlds. Dex became the station's official liaison to off-world delegations. He learned 6 more languages and became known throughout the sector as a bridge builder between species. His calm presence and deep understanding helped other species see that were not what they had feared. His work in the medical sector expanded. He trained others who began arriving at Meridian Prime, teaching them his philosophy that healing was the highest calling. He saved hundreds of lives, and his gentle hands became legendary among those who had been in his care. Continued as their guardian and mentor, but over time she became less their keeper and more their advocate. She published papers about cross-species education and transformation. She spoke to councils and governments and organizations about the possibility of change. She became known as the human who had looked at 4 young monsters and had seen 4 young people waiting to be born. Years later, when the population on Meridian Prime had grown to hundreds, a new generation of young would listen to their elders tell the story of the cubs. They would listen to, and Myra and Dex, and tell about the woman who had taught them that they could choose to be more than their species' violence. And those young would understand that their future was not written by their past. Their future was written by the choices they made every single day. Stood in the observation gallery one final time, many years after it all began, and watched Myra show her own daughter around the station. The young cub was learning art from her mother. The young cub was learning that could create instead of destroy. Thought about her own daughter, the one she had lost so many years ago. She thought about how that loss had led her to save 4 young lives. She thought about how the universe sometimes worked in patterns that made sense only when you stepped back and looked at the whole thing. Closed her eyes and whispered to the daughter she had lost. I saved them for you. I gave them the future you never got to have. And somewhere in the space between the stars, the four cubs roared. But these roars were not roars of rage or fear. These roars were the voices of hope. These roars were the sound of a future that was being built by hands that chose not to destroy. These roars echoed through the galaxy like the call of future kings, not kings of conquest, but kings of peace. Made a decision that would change everything. He agreed to prepare a communication channel. He agreed to let the Cubs speak to the collective commander. 3 days later, the fleet was in weapons range of Meridian Prime Station. The battle was minutes away if negotiations failed. And 4 young stood in the communication chamber, ready to tell their story to the beings that had destroyed their world. Looked out at the stars with him. I do not know, she said, but I know that if we keep choosing what is right, if we keep proving that change is possible, then maybe the galaxy will eventually see what I see. Maybe it will see 4 young who are not weapons. Maybe it will see hope. The Cubs settled into their new space. They rested after the radiation exposure and began to plan the next phase of their transformation. She was going to bring the station to them. She was going to make them ambassadors. She was going to make the galaxy listen. When the station's life support system began to fail 3 weeks later, the Cubs were ready, and they would show everyone on Meridian Prime what real choice looked like. They were no longer roaring they were starting to listen. They were starting to believe that maybe, in this cold station orbiting a distant star, someone actually cared whether they lived or died. Had no idea how she would convince the Galactic Council of that. But for now, she sat on the cold floor of the containment sector and watched 4 young eat fruit and slowly stop being afraid of her. It was a beginning,